Am I recording this on the same day as I recorded my last video? Yes. Am I no longer home alone? Also yes. Am I still sick? Also yes. So, video and audio, still not the best. We're gonna work with what we got. We're gonna work with the background noise. It's fine. It shouldn't be too bad. But today, I'm going to be reviewing the book Cinder. I really like this cover. Oh my god. Shines. There are other cover designs that I actually like better. I'm probably going to put it right here if I can. But this cover design is so pretty, but I do still like this one purely due to like the texture differences and the fact that it's shiny. Oh my god. But I'm already reading the second book in this series, so I will also be reading off of notes. These notes, however, are much more organized than my notes for Blood Air. However, they're much more organized, but they're also much longer. Like, my notes for Blood Air, the book was about this big. It was like 2 or 3 pages. Yeah, we're gonna see how long this video is, and we're gonna try and edit it down. This book is very conveniently split up into, I believe, 4 different parts. So this video will also be split into 4 different parts. Alright, before I start, context. This takes place in, I don't believe we are given an exact year. I don't believe we're given an exact year, but this is taking place far enough into the future that World War III has already happened, and due to that, there are still like a lot of the old countries that have been around, but a lot of them have merged together, and even some countries have merged into federations, like I believe the American Federation, no, it's the European Federation, the British Empire still exists, I think, well, not Empire, British Kingdom still exists, I believe, America exists, but there's something up with America where they're also joined with different countries, and same thing with Africa, where a lot of the countries still exist, but I believe that they have merged. And in Asia, I'm pretty sure all of the countries, because no other Asian countries are mentioned, Asia has completely merged into what is called the Commonwealth, the Eastern Commonwealth, with their capital being New Beijing. And that's where our story takes place for Cinder. We're introduced to Cinder, a cyborg mechanic/engineer who's currently tending to her stall in the marketplace. A customer she doesn't recognize comes up, and her retina scanners inform her that it's Prince Kai, heir to the throne of the Eastern Commonwealth. He asks her to fix an old android, saying that it's for sentimental reasons. It used to be his old tutor, but she can kind of sense that it's for a little bit more than that. She agrees, and literal sentences after he's gone, there's a plague outbreak, and he's very close proximity to that, and I'm very surprised that him being pretty much at the marketplace when that happened doesn't play a bigger role than it does. When Cinder gets home, we get to see that she has a very, very sweet stepsister named Peony, and a horrible stepsister and stepmom named Pearl, and I forget the mom's name. Since this is a Cinderella retelling, obviously the dad is an inventor and also dead. He died from the plague when Cinder was literally first adopted. There's also a ball/festival being held at the time, and obviously Peony and Pearl Cinder's stepsisters are getting, the whole like princess treatment. They're getting new dresses, they're getting their makeup done. But Cinder gets the Cinderella treatment of, if you finish your chores and find a suitable dress on your own, maybe you can go. Cinder immediately knows that that is fully a cop out answer of like, there's no way you're finishing all your chores, and even if you did, you still can't go. Uh, and doesn't want to, but she doesn't want to give her stepmom a reason to throw her away, and her android friend who is named Eco. So she just sort of nods and goes along with it and doesn't call her out for being a liar. So instead of getting angry, she just goes to a nearby junkyard to scavenge parts with her sweet stepsister to escape her family for a little bit. While she's at the junkyard, Cinder finds a piece that she was looking for her family's car, or hovers as they're called, because they hover. And I think they're not actually driven by people. I think they're all self-piloted. So she finds what she was looking for, as well as a gasoline car that looks like a rotted pumpkin. And gasoline cars are very uncommon at this point in time. They're all like relics, like they're old enough to be like in museums. Like they're not just like antiques anymore. Like literally no one drives them. Peony also catches the plague while they're there, which is obviously the much bigger plot point, but I have it written in my notes just so suddenly and offhandedly. Obviously, she's sent to quarantine where it's pretty much a guarantee that she's going to die in a few days. Cinder's also tested and comes up negative, which means Peony got it from literally anywhere else and not Cinder, which isn't a stretch because this plague is infamous for appearing out of nowhere and just showing up without rhyme or reason. However, just because she was in that area and also brought Peony to the junkyard, she carries a lot of guilt. And on top of the guilt that she carries herself, her stepmom and stepsister are furious at her and blame her for everything because they don't want to just acknowledge that tragedies happen and can happen to anyone. Because of this, Cinder's horrible stepmom sends her to go volunteer to be a test subject for the vaccine that's being developed for the plague, and it is a guaranteed death sentence that no one who has volunteered or gotten picked due to a draft system has ever survived, ever. Literally, if you go get tested by this vaccine, you die. It's immediate. This is also a very stupid decision because while families are compensated for like their family member going off and volunteering or getting drafted, that money isn't going to last forever, and Cinder is their only form of income. Nobody else in that house works. She's the only one who works, and by sending her away, they're basically saying, this is your fixed amount of money for the rest of your life. Honestly, I hope the stepmom and the stepsister starve. They're horrible people. We briefly switch over to a really weird old doctor's perspective. He has a weird thing about experimenting on young girls, and he hallucinates, which is explained later in the book. The reason he experiments that he looks for young girls specifically to experiment on instead of like older men. Older men he typically gives a placebo, while younger girls he'll give the actual vaccine to, is because he's looking for Princess Celine of the Moon, because in this world there's a society of people who live on the moon who have the power over something called bioelectricity, where they can essentially they can manipulate the energy in your brain and in your body to either mind control you or make you see things or like brainwash you. And he hallucinates because he is also a person from the moon. They're called lunars. He's also a lunar, but he doesn't use his powers. But because he doesn't use his powers, he uh he like it affects you really bad if you're a lunar and you don't use your powers at all. So he ends up hallucinating because of all this suppressed power. He is still really weird though. Like that doesn't take away from the fact of how weird he is. Uh, I will not lie. At first, I hated him immensely. He does grow on you a little bit. He is still, again, very weird. During the vaccine trials, it's revealed that Cinder is immune to the plague, and because of that, is now considered indispensable. Uh, the doctor is still weird, but this is where he kind of grows on you a little bit, and I do get a little bit of respect for him because he just agrees to all of Cinder's demands with like no hesitation of allowing her to leave, paying her. There is a sense of like, if you don't just return on your own, I'll just come find you, and then you get none of these demands. But the fact that he does agree to them does, help a little bit with his likability. It's also revealed that the king is dying, and that his son Kai is extremely worried, as he should be. Not only because that's his dad, and obviously you'd be worried if your parent is dying, but also that's the king, and Kai is still 18 and legally allowed to run the kingdom, yes, but he's still 18 and nowhere near ready to run an entire kingdom. Especially because the Lunar Queen, Lavanna, is definitely trying to marry him and then kill him to take the throne. There's just so much that he's not ready for, and I honestly feel so bad for him. He does a lot of things just so he doesn't have to deal with Lavanna, which honestly fair. Probably not the best move, but I can't say I would have done any differently. Again, he's an 18-year-old kid. Like he's just trying to live his life. So, obviously, given a little bit of time, the king dies. Cinder ends up visiting Peony in quarantine, which she's able to do because, she's immune. She can't get sick from there. It's revealed that, like, quarantine is, like, it's not really like a hospital setting. It's just a place to stick the dying until they die. It smells horrible. It looks horrible. It's just a warehouse full of the dead and dying, like off in like the outskirts of the city. Cinder and Kai also like meet again as Cinder is leaving the palace for the first time. It's not super important to the plot, but they're very cute and I love them. Cinder goes to the palace after visiting Peony and sees Kai again. She consoles him a bit without knowing because she's great, and he asks her to the ball. She says it's out of self-preservation, so he doesn't have to go with Lavanna, but he does definitely like her at this point, and again, they're adorable and I love them. She does turn him down because she's going to run away that night, but, Jesus. I really think she could pull off both. I just really want her to go to the ball with Kai. Literally directly after this interaction with Kai, she finds out she's a lunar. It's found out later in the book that she's Princess Celine, which honestly, the second she found out that she's a lunar, I saw coming a mile away. But this isn't something that she saw coming, and it's not something she wanted, and she is not happy. Up until this point, she's seen lunars as like just completely evil. Like Lavanna is like, it's kind of understandable because Lavanna is so awful, but the reason that all the other lunars are so awful is because Lavanna is like constantly mind controlling them or brainwashing them, and it's not a good time for anybody. And speaking of lunars and Queen Lavanna, Queen Lavanna lands on Earth and immediately tries to seduce a barely legal teenager with magic, despite being a grown woman who's been in power for at least 12 years. I find this so gross. I know she's not doing it because she actually likes Kai and she just wants his throne, and that way she can marry him and then kill him and then be in power. But Jesus, I hate it. I hate everything about it. Cinder finally fixes Kai's android and finds out the android holds classified information, as she kind of suspected when she was first given the task. And that classified information is about Kai searching for Princess Celine, which was further confirmation that Cinder is definitely Princess Celine. Kai doesn't know that, though. All he knows is that she's alive and on Earth, and that at some point she was being raised in Europe. A little bit of context: Cinder was adopted from Europe. Obviously, it's Cinder. I don't think this was ever supposed to be a surprise. But again, it was very nicely foreshadowed. At the very least, you know that this wasn't coming out of nowhere. Queen has a mirror put onto her plate specifically to secretly test Kai to see how he'd react to seeing her angry. Context: Lunars hate mirrors because they can't trick mirrors with their magic. So if you look at a reflection of a Lunar, you see their true form, and if they're using magic to make themselves pretty, then you can see how ugly they are in the mirror. So she has a mirror put onto her plate and almost has a servant stab her eye out, even though she didn't do anything, because Levana sucks. And because Kai doesn't suck, he takes the blame for it, saying that he had it done as a prank. And Levana sees this as weakness and Kai not knowing how to pick his battles and let the servant take the punishment, even if Kai doesn't suck, Levana does. That is the lesson I learned. So when Cinder goes to take the robot to Kai, she arrives during a protest. She could have waited long enough for this protest to have died down. Literally wait, not even a full day. Just wait an hour and the protest would have been over and everything would have been fine. But whatever. She just had to do it. She felt like she had to do it now because of how important this robot is. If the robot is so important, don't take it into a zone that could very easily become a riot. But in order to quell the protesters, Queen Levana uses her mind control powers on the crowd. Cinder is able to resist it, but weirdly it does still affect her, despite the fact that she's supposed to be something called a shell. A type of Lunar who can't use Lunar abilities, but is also supposedly immune to them. These types of Lunars are killed on Luna because they can't be brainwashed, which was Cinder's original reasoning for why she would have been smuggled off Earth, or smuggled off the moon to Earth. Turns out she's not a shell, but she has a chip that was implanted when she was younger by her dad, which was, he was an inventor that was sort of his big invention that never really took off because it would only be useful to certain people. But she does have a chip in her spine that assists in not being manipulated, and that also suppresses her Lunar abilities, so that even though she hasn't been using her abilities her entire life, she doesn't get the same side effects that the weird doctor has. His name is Dr. Elrond, by the way. I feel like I should have said that earlier. His name is Dr. Elrond. Dr. Elrond also disabled the chip without letting her know, what it was or what it does, which I feel was such a stupid move, because now she has to use her powers or else she's going to end up like you, and it just makes it easier for her to be brainwashed. He is so stupid. I think that was the stupidest move made in the entire book, and I hated him for it. She also experiences intense physical pain upon him deactivating this chip, and she continues to experience intense physical pain when she experiences strong emotions. So I don't get what the pro was to this. On the bright side, Kai tries to kiss Cinder. It doesn't go well because of the aforementioned extreme pain when she's emotional, but the point is, my ship is sailing, and I love that for them. Honestly, I wish it would sail quicker. Back to horrifying reality, because main characters do not get a break. Peony dies as Cinder's bringing her an antidote. and Cinder's horrible stepmom, despite this not being the first time that Cinder has been out to this area and still come back, reports her missing and a runaway, and takes her foot. She just takes her foot. Luckily, before this happens, Cinder is able to get the antidote to a young child that she recognizes, from her time in the marketplace. It's still horrible because her stepmom is horrible, and in fact, despite the fact that she no longer has a left foot, she's still expected to work because, again, she is the only person that works in this house. She is the only form of income that they have. And on top of all this, because Cinder tried to run away, Eco's killed. She kills Eco and sells her for parts and only keeps the most useless parts, which luckily includes her damaged personality chip, which means if Cinder can find a new body, she can insert that and then bring Eco back. But I hate the stepmom with every fiber of my being, I promise you. Kai is lovely and gives Cinder beautiful gloves in a last ditch attempt to get her to go to the ball with him. She still declines, but they're so pretty. Despite this, Kai still tells her to keep the gift, but Pearl, being the awful human being she is, sees Kai give her the gloves, and out of jealousy and just pure awful personness, tosses them in the mud and throws greasy tools on top of them, effectively ruining them. And these were like pure white embroidered like elbow length gloves. They were so pretty and so nice and so delicate. And Cinder is better than me because I would have burned that girl's dress as payback. Cinder has almost effectively lost everything at this point. I would have burned her dress. I probably wouldn't have burned her dress because Cinder is planning on running away tonight, and obviously, like, she's not going to go to... Pearl isn't going to go to the ball if she doesn't have a dress, and if she doesn't go to the ball, Cinder doesn't have her chance to run away. However, I would have trashed everything in her room. I would have had to do something to just mess up her stuff before leaving. It would not have been a good time. Cinder is getting ready to leave in her pumpkin of a car, but as she's trying to cut her ID chip out of her wrist, an old TV that she had attempted to test the decom chip on, which was the thing that was messing up the Android that she had to take out, she inserted it into the TV to see what it did. Nothing happened. But now the TV lights up despite, I don't think it's plugged into anything at this point. It just lights up because the decom chip is in it. The person on the other side is a Lunar, who I can only assume is Crest from book 3, because I heard that Crest is a hacker, but who she is isn't super important to the book right now, but she's never given a name, so I will refer to her as Crest. Crest tells Cinder that Queen Lavanna knows about Kai's research into Princess Celine and plans to kill him once she marries him, which she's convinced him to do by offering him an antidote for the plague, which the first sample vial is what Cinder had tried to give to Peony, but ended up giving to a young boy, which did prove effective in curing him. It completely worked. However, once she does this, she does fully plan on waging war on all of Earth once she becomes Empress. So even if she didn't like Kai all that much, there's still plenty of reason for Cinder to give up on her chance of escaping her awful family in exchange for trying to save Kai, because if she saves Kai, she saves the world. So she abandons her plans of escaping her awful family, dons Peony's dress, that way she looks at least semi put together enough to get in and not look super suspicious, but Peony's dress is incredibly dirty and covered in oil because after Peony's death, it was put into the basement with all of Cinder's work tools, so obviously there's a lot of grease and greasy tools. She also, because she doesn't have a foot anymore, she puts on her old foot from when she was a child that hasn't fit her for years. It's very tight. It's like putting on a shoe that's way too small, like 3 sizes too small at least, except it's your entire foot. Fortunately, she convinces Kai to not marry Levana. Unfortunately, she loses her foot and is arrested for treason because she attempts to shoot Levana because Levana tries to get her to shoot herself. So a lot of things happen. It comes out that Cinder is a lunar, and then that adds on to a whole new layer of trouble. Levana wants to see her killed. The country thinks that she was brainwashing Kai. Kai kind of thinks that she was brainwashing him. It's a whole problem. Fortunately, but like also not a ton of fortune because she still has to basically do the impossible. While Cinder's in jail, Dr. Elrin comes to visit her, and he reveals that he's leaving the country and basically says, hey, break out of prison, come find me in Africa. Doesn't give her specific coordinates or a specific country, specific city, nothing. Just, hey, I'm going to be in Africa, come to Africa and find me. No directions, nothing. He does, however, give her a new hand and a new foot they don't look like they aren't super discreet because they do still look like metal hands and feet, but her foot fits her for once, and her hand has a lot of tools in it. So he does give her a little bit of help with breaking out, but he does still say, hey, break out of this maximum security prison and come find me in the entire continent of Africa. He also tells her that he also reveals that she is indeed Princess Celine, which I called way back in the beginning, but she finally finds out. She's again not super happy about it, but what are you gonna do? She's the main character. She has to deal with the main character problems. This would have been a very different book if one of Cinder's demands was like to help her fake her death so that she didn't have to go back to her stepfamily to just disable her tracker and house her in the palace as a patient or a test subject. And it's not that far outside of the realm of possibility. I didn't really touch on it because it's not really expanded upon until book 2. It's kind of just hand waved. But the government in this does some really shady stuff. So this could have been a completely different book, but I'm glad it wasn't. I really enjoyed this book.